And then the last one is going to be the obliquus inferior. That is going to originate at the transverse process of C1, and it's going to go down to the spinous process of C2. And because this one is more of an oblique angle, that means it's going to be responsible primarily. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with TV Fork, and today I'm joined by Michael from One Body, and today we're going to be teaching you how to be your own therapist by going over the top 5 muscles responsible for neck pain. And the muscles we're going to be covering today, there's a whole lot more that we're going to be covering on our seminar on September 18th. These are just going to be 5 common muscles responsible for neck pain that I see in my own clinic. But with regard to the actual muscles, we want to get into the skeletal anatomy first, so we're going to mark down the bony landmarks. With regard to the skeletal anatomy, some few important landmarks are going to be the manubrium, which is part of your breastbone at the very top. I'm not the best drawer, so just hang in there with me. Next, once we've got the manubrium down, we want to mark the clavicle. That's going to be this bone right over here. Then we also want to mark down the first rib. Just imagine that being your first rib. And now that we have that, I'm going to have Michael turn to the side. We want to get the mastoid process next, which is going to be this part right over here. And then I'm going to have Michael turn to the side a little bit more. We want to mark down the superior nuchal line, so I'm going to have Michael turn just a little bit more. Right over here, where you see that little bump, that's the external occipital protuberance. So I'm going to just mark down that first, draw a little circle right over there. And then that line that crosses it is going to be the superior nuchal line. And then just below it, we have the inferior nuchal line. Then, now that we've marked all that, we want to mark down the vertebrae. So we're going to go ahead and palpate. I believe this to be the C7. So I can have Michael look up to the sky. And perfect, it didn't go anywhere, so Michael could look straight ahead. I had the right spot. So we have our C7 right over here. Then we have the C6, C5, C4, C3, C2, and then the atlas. Then in the middle of each of them, we have a spinous process. That's what these little dots are in the middle of the vertebrae. And then out to the side, we have the transverse process. The transverse process is going to be most prominent on the C1, and then they're going to have these little protrusions laterally at the rest of the cervical spine. And then the last marking that we want to do is the actual scapula itself. With regard to the scapula, that is your shoulder blade. And right there we have the superior angle. Then we have, there we go, spine of the scapula going right across. And I believe those are all the landmarks that we actually need. So next I'm going to have Michael, he could actually stay where he is right now, because the first muscle responsible for neck pain is going to be, it's not one muscle, it's actually a group of muscles, and that's going to be the suboccipital group. With regard to the suboccipitals, we actually have 4 suboccipital muscles. We have the rectus capitis posterior minor and major, and then we have the obliquus capitis posterior superior and inferior. For the rectus capitis minor, that one is going to attach from the medial half of the inferior nuchal line, and it's going to go all the way down to the spinous process, or sorry, the protrusion that originates at the C1. And this muscle right over here is predominantly going to be responsible for protraction of the head. Next, if we were to look at the rectus capitis major, that's going to originate from the lateral half of the inferior nuchal line all the way down to the spinous process of your C2. This one over here, primarily it is going to be responsible for extension of the cervical spine, specifically at the atlanto-occipital joint. Next, when we look at the obliquus muscles, we have the obliquus superior, and the obliquus superior is going to originate from right in between the superior nuchal line and the inferior nuchal line on the lateral aspect. And then that is going to attach right down to the transverse process of your C1. So this one right over here is primarily responsible for extension of the cervical spine at the atlanto-occipital joint. And then the last one is going to be the obliquus inferior. That is going to originate at the transverse process of C1, and it's going to go down to the spinous process of C2. And because this one is more of an oblique angle, that means it's going to be responsible primarily for some ipsilateral rotation, so rotating to the same side. That is the suboccipital group. Next, the second muscle commonly responsible for neck pain is going to be the levator scapulae muscle. With regard to the levator scapulae, it is going to originate from your those transverse process of C1, C2, C3, and C4, and they are all going to connect to the scapula, specifically the medial border, starting at the superior angle of the scapula to the root of the spine of the scapula. And because they travel mostly in the sagittal plane, it's going to be primarily responsible for extension of the cervical spine. So Michael, just go into some extension of the cervical spine. It's also going to be responsible for some ipsilateral flexion, so rotating the side to the same side. Oh, ipsilateral. Yep, perfect. And that is the levator scapulae muscle. Next, we're going to get into the sternocleidomastoid. So Michael's going to turn to the side. The sternocleidomastoid, it has two heads. It has a sternal head and it has a clavicular head. The sternal head is going to attach, let's just go right from the front. The sternal head is going to attach from the manubrium, and it's going to go all the way to the actual mastoid process. And then the clavicular attachment is going to attach from the clavicle, same thing, right to the mastoid process. Now, with regard to this muscle right over here, the sternocleidomastoid at the lower cervical spine, it's going to be responsible for flexion of the cervical spine. And then at the upper cervical spine, it's going to be responsible for extension of the cervical spine. And that is the sternocleidomastoid. The fourth muscle responsible for neck pain is going to be the anterior scalene. The anterior scalene, it is going to attach from the transverse process of C3 to C6. So those landmarks right over here. I'm just going to have Michael turn to the side so you can see. So we have C3, C4, C5, and C6. And then it is going to attach right into the anterior portion of the first rib. So it's going to go down this way right over here. And it is primarily going to be responsible for flexion of the cervical spine and also ipsilateral flexion of the cervical spine. So flexing it toward the same side. And then the fifth and final muscle responsible for neck pain is going to be the middle scalene. The middle scalene, very, very similar. Only difference is this one over here, it is going to attach from the transverse process of C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, and C7. And they are going to attach once again to the first rib. So I'm going to have Michael turn to the front. They're going to attach right over here to the first rib. And once again, it's going to be responsible primarily for flexion of the cervical spine and also ipsilateral flexion of the cervical spine. And there you have it. Those are the top 5 muscles responsible for neck pain. If you do have neck pain, you're definitely going to want to do some either stretching or strengthening for these various muscles. We're going to be going over those in the next coming weeks. But another thing worth noting is we're going to be going over a whole lot more muscles at our seminar on September 18th. So these are just 5 of the more common muscles. We're going to be going over a whole lot more. That's going to be September 18th. And then this coming Friday at 2 p.m., we're going to be going over some assessments that you could do on the cervical spine to see what type of dysfunction you're dealing with. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you guys have any questions, drop your questions down in the comments section. And if you have any comments, go ahead and leave them down because we would love to hear your guys' thoughts. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to keep making these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.